So good morning and welcome. Today's presentation is on caregiving for elderly parents, yourself, your siblings, and finances. So I'm Cindy Lavoie, and I met you guys at the last time I presented. I hope you've attended some of the other sessions as well. Did you attend the others?
Yes, yeah. I think
Good.
I went to all of them.
Oh, awesome. Good.
I'm Bernadette Sigmund, and I'm an RN. I'm also have been a caregiver for my mother and others in my family as well. Anyway, we've had
a brief snapshot.
Cindy and
Both of us have professional caregiving backgrounds, and that she's a registered nurse, and my profession is home health care. And then we both have been personal caregivers, rendering care ourselves to loved ones. I've had 6 different times I've been a caregiver for different people in my life, and you have had several experiences as well.
Exactly.
So we're going to open with something you guys have seen before. But again, we go back to the ultimate caregiver, Mother Teresa. When I did the last presentation, I hadn't spoken to Bernadette yet, and when we were talking about the ultimate caregiver, she said the same thing. This person came to mind. So Mother Teresa, of course. The quote is different, though. There's a quote that we felt that Mother Teresa said this time around that fits, especially the part about self and siblings,
yeah.
so much better. Bernadette, I'll let you expand upon the quote a little, just because we came up.
As you can see, it says, I can do things you cannot. You can do things I cannot. Together, we can do great things, Mother Teresa. And particularly with siblings, when it comes to the care of someone in the family, it is very helpful if they have an expertise in one thing or another, or they are more financially able to contribute, no matter what. I mean, that is exactly what Mother Teresa was referring to. She didn't expect anybody to be able to leave their home and families and go to India and be a missionary. However, financial support or some other way was very helpful. So, same kind of thing.
So why us? Why Bernadette and Cindy? Right? Well, interesting. We met as caregivers. Bernadette's mother and my grandmother, we had both ended up putting them in the same memory care facility. And Bernadette, why don't you tell that story?
Well, I was told by one of the nurses that my mother was going into somebody's room. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, my mom's going in people's rooms. What am I going to do? And my sister happened to be with me, and we followed her down to this particular room. And when we opened the door, we knew immediately why she wanted to go there. It happened to be Cindy's grandmother's room, Grandma Dell, and the furniture was French provincial, exactly very close to the furniture she had grown up with. And we knew that she felt comfortable sitting there. So she would go in there and talk to Grandma Dell, and Grandma Dell didn't seem to mind.
Nope, not at all.
They kind of became fast friends, and that's kind of how we met.
Yeah, that's exactly how we met, going to the facility often. I think Bernadette was there a whole heck of a lot more than I could be there, too. But we both had our times where if I wasn't there, I knew that she was either visiting with Grandma Dell with her mother in my room at some points, or when I was there and I wouldn't see Bernadette, I'd go in and speak to her mom and say hello, just because you become a sort of bond,
Yes.
just because we're in the same facility. And we developed this extended caregiving family of support by being in a facility. So it was Bernadette and I, we became friends, and then realized we went to the same church, of course, and all of that. But there was Herman, whose wife was in there, Herb, whose wife was in there, and Carol, who we see in town now, whose mother-in-law was in there. And you develop this bond that just because you're in that same caregiving mode, that people who have been in your caregiving circle fast bond, friendship, whatever you want to call it.
Right. I kind of liken it to the military. When you've been in the foxhole with these guys, you develop a camaraderie. You're going through the same things together, and it's something that lasts for quite some time. So anyway, that's how we met.
And so,
And I like
Bernadette
to
and
believe that
Cindy.
we're good friends even today.
And we are now, right. That blossomed. Even my grandmother passed, and then her mother passed. And we've become, even closer after that because of seeing each other and knowing what we both have gone through. And then just taking an interest in each other's lives as well and
Right.
things of that nature. Do these look familiar to you, Helen? Any of these? The stress,
Yes.
exactly.
Good.
And when Bernadette and I were talking about these, at every single point, we have experienced one of these, at every single point. And there's more. There's another slide,
Yes,
too.
yes.
You experience different things at different times as a caregiver. This is the self part, obviously. Before we get into discussing those a little bit, got a little gamey thing to do, right?
Right. Well, before that, I just wanted to bring up something that was written up in the JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. It has to do with a physician named Richard Kirkpatrick. I believe he's from Florida. And he had a patient who's a 28-year-old Filipino-American woman, excuse me, who he diagnosed with lupus, okay? So upon making this diagnosis, he wanted to put her on immunosuppressive drugs and steroids, which is the protocol, that's the usual protocol. And so he did, but to no avail. This woman had no change whatsoever. So his next move was, well, let's increase the dose and up the frequency of the dose. Well, as it turns out, the woman declined, and she went to her native Philippines to see a witch doctor who had to remove a curse that was put on her by a former boyfriend. So she goes to the Philippines and has this curse removed by this witch doctor. And she comes back to the United States and sees Dr. Kirkpatrick again. And he's absolutely flabbergasted because she has no signs of lupus, and she also has no signs of abrupt steroid withdrawal. None. So he's really amazed by this. But so he presented this paper to the JAMA, and the question at the end of the article was, well, by what mechanism did this happen? But actually, it was not truly whether a witch doctor succeeded where the Western counterpart failed. It wasn't really that. But what this really points to, I believe, is that she most likely had a mild case of this to begin with. And it was not until this emotional upheaval by this curse that she felt was put upon her that started this whole cascade of symptoms in the first place. And so, anyway, it definitely gives credence to how much the mind has, mind over matter, mind over the body. It affects the delicate balance of health and disease. So I just thought that was, kind of a significant point to bring up, because this lends itself to the same topic of stress. Okay. Now, thank you. Do most of you feel that you are pretty fair in your judgments and your decisions? Do you feel that you have no bias, that you look at all the alternatives before you make a decision? Do most of you feel that way, that you try to take in all the information before you do that? Okay. Well, I just passed out some index cards. I want you to just sit back and relax. Does everyone have one? Oh, I'm sorry, the pens, if you pass those around, sorry. All right. Now just relax. I want to read off a series of words to you. I just want you to listen to them and think about the image that you get with this. Yeah, okay. You need more pens and... Okay.
You have one, you have one.
Thank you.
I both have one for you too.
All right. Just listen to these words. Bed, rest, wake, slumber, pillow, tired, dream, eat, night, soft, snore, awake. Okay? Now I'd like you to just jot down on your index cards there as many of those words as you can recall. You don't necessarily have to recall all of them, just as many as you can.
Whatever comes to mind.
Okay? Whatever comes to mind. Okay. How many of you had the word rest, bed, okay, pillow, okay, tired, sleep?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. A lot of you had the word sleep, and that's good. I'm glad you remembered most of the words. However, I never mentioned the word sleep.
You said slumber.
But I never mentioned sleep.
Okay.
Okay?
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. So what just happened?
Exactly.
The reality of what we just did was the spoken word. Okay? The words I mentioned were bed, rest, wake, slumber, pillow, tired, dream, eat, night, soft, snore, and awake. Sleep was not in there. Okay? But what you responded to was the image that you had as a pre-existing belief that these words lent themselves to sleep. You see? So the spoken word was the reality and the other was not. Now, the reason I mention this or put this through is to prove a point that when we are having stress, we respond to the image that we have in our mind about what has happened, not necessarily what actually happened. Okay? So stress actually begins with a perception, okay? That you say you had an altercation with someone and or you felt like you were not treated fairly at work, a lot of work for no little pay or something on that order. You don't respond to the external event, okay? What happens is you respond to the electrochemical transduction of the information you receive, whether it be auditory, visual, or sensory. and that forms an image in your mind, okay? And the image gives rise to the emotion. Okay, does that make sense to y'all? So the image actually activates endocrine pathways, and it is profoundly influenced by your past experiences and your beliefs, okay? So we do this all the time. We tend to form images that leave out or fabricate to reinforce pre-existing beliefs. So that's how stress actually starts. It's a response to an image. It's not really the external event itself.
Tying that to being in a caregiving situation, if you're responding to some of the images that you see in caring for your loved one, because you'll see a progression of decline in most cases when we're talking about elderly parents. So the images you see, that actually starts building the inflammation in your body as you respond to those images, as opposed to the external, what's actually happening, if I said that correctly. So. Are any of you in a caregiving situation right now who came in? I know that these people are here. And you're caring for
My mother.
your mother. Does she live with you? Does she live nearby? Does she live in another state?
She lives here. She doesn't live with me. She's in a rehab facility right now.
And then we'll be going back to her own home? Or
She's unable to do that at this point.
Okay, so you're in the planning phase right now. So, and you all, are you caregivers for anybody right now? No. Are you a caregiver for anybody right now?
She took care of my grandmother, my father's mother and father. My grandmother was 3-4 years. My grandfather was 5 years. So my mother took care of all of them.
Took care of all of them.
It was quite stressful.
Yes, and that's the part we're on now, the physical signs of stress. As I was saying, Bernadette and I both experienced these all at different points in our various caregiving situations. Back, neck, shoulder, and jaw pain. And I'll have to say that is one of the ones I experienced the most. I had a lot of lower back issues, and I went and thought it was something wrong with my back, and the x-rays, there was inflammation in my spine. And what causes the inflammation? Stress. Exactly. So that's definitely one of the issues that I struggled with the most. Disrupted sleep, and you all, how many have, in your caregiving situation, had any back, neck, jaw pain? Anybody yet? Yeah. And the jaw pain comes from usually at night clenching. You have all that bottled up stress, and when you sleep, you clench a lot of stress. And that's one of the things why you may experience jaw pain. And that can turn into tooth pain if you're grinding or anything like that. That's one of the stress effects. Disrupted sleep. Sleep is hard to come by anyway. And then when you're a caregiver who's experienced disrupted sleep from caregiving, and you may not know why your sleep is disrupted either. And again, it's the anxiety or the stress coming out.
Absolutely. I can speak for, in my situation, when my mother lived with us for several years, and she became a fall risk, and I would stay down in the guest room with her and found myself up multiple times through the night and not getting any sleep. And this, because I couldn't go right back to sleep and actually nor could she. So it was up and down, up and down, up and down. And this went on for many months. And I didn't realize the effect that it was having on me. I just knew I was not quite myself. I was a little irritable. And it was my family that realized it and said, this is too much for you. And I went in this very cocky, into this caregiving situation, extremely cocky, like I have this. Because I had worked as a nurse. I'd handled a whole lot higher acuity cases and more of them at one time. And I just couldn't believe that I would have trouble taking care of one person at one time. But when you add all this in, including the emotional factor of watching somebody that you love dearly who was so strong, so young, so vital, deteriorate before your very eyes. It's a very hard thing to encounter. Yes, ma'am.
I just realized, because my father was in the hospital, but it was just like I took care of him. I was staying in the hospital
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago. So it was not a long time, but he was hospitalized and came back from the hospital. Then he was hospitalized, I guess, for 7 months. So my mother was not able to handle, so I took care of him. I realized that was I think that was a part.
Yes, where their family stepped in, and as my family did, and we realized what we ended up doing for a brief solution there was having someone come in from an agency to stay with my mother through the night so I could sleep. And just on a little sidekick thing, I'd mentioned that we did have some furniture with some valuables in them. And so to protect both us and the caregiver who was going to stay with us, we just put little locks into the furniture. And that way, we would have everything protected while someone was there during the time that we were asleep.
And you mentioned you cared for your father while he was in the hospital. And that's stressful too, being in a hospital situation. I had 2 caregiving incidences. My mother was in the hospital and ended up, after several weeks, passing away, and my son. That is a whole nother set of stressors because you're on someone else's turf, not in your own home or your parents' own home. You have a lot of things going on around you, interruptions all the time, and you're sitting in very awkward positions in a hospital. The furniture isn't as comfortable as yours, you're not used to it, and all of these physical signs happen just as well when you're in a facility situation, not just if they're in your home or you're at their home.
Yeah, I lost weight and I haven't been able to gain back.
And that's one of the signs right there. Appetite changes, obviously.
I wish I had that problem.
Appetite changes, your schedules are off, you're in different places. Appetite changes is, synonymous with any type of stress, but particularly when you're caregiving because of the demands upon you. Chest pain and palpitations, anybody had any of those in their caregiving? Yes?
To the point that my doctor wants me to do a nuclear stress test on Thursday. I'm going to flunk it.
Well, and yes, my back situation was the same. I had to go through all these testings, and it was created by the stress.
Yeah, I
And-
don't necessarily want to do the testing because I know I'm going to flunk it.
Yeah. Well, and we've got some counter stress slides coming up here in just a minute, but we want to go over some of the signs. So that's why it says the stress is real. The things that you're experiencing, heart palpitations or back pain or whatever, it is real and it is associated with caregiving. No doubt about it. If you're thinking there's something else wrong with me, it's related to the stress of being a caregiver. There may be something else wrong. I don't want to discount that too. But majority of it, these are things you will experience. Get your flu shot because your immune system goes down if you haven't gotten it already, anybody who's caregiving, and get your loved one a flu shot too. So, loss of libido. If you're married, my father lived with us, and that's real. And that happens too because you're so busy caregiving. Digestive issues, it goes along with appetite changes. You'll have constipation, you can have diarrhea, you have stomach upset, get a lot of gastric reflux, just all different things. And this stress that's boiling around in your body causing inflammation in different parts. Okay, we've scared everybody enough with physical signs. So. Well, there is also some emotional signs. Maybe I'll stand here to do the slide. Dot's guilt comes in here at the bottom. Feeling guilty. So, do these look familiar to all of you? I don't think we have to go through them in great detail. But if you had to pick one, they all stand out in my mind. I felt every single one of these. I think the overwhelming feeling for me, because, I also work full time, have a job, you have families, that really constantly was on my mind. But I'm going to let you jump to the feeling guilty.
In feeling guilty, I'll tell you that I don't remember having that much guilt myself as a caregiver. However, my sister and I walked out of Tallahassee Memory Care after we were visiting my mother, and she gets into the car and starts boo-hooing to beat the band. And so I let her boo-hoo for a little bit, and I said, "What's the matter with you?" And she said very directly, "I haven't done enough for Mom." And that was her guilt. She was feeling guilt about not having done enough for my mother. Now, she had younger children. She lived in Maryland, and it was not that easy for her to get down here. So I said to her, "All right, time out. Let's think through this for a minute." When we took out a long-term care policy for my mom, we had, I'm one of 7, and each of us contributed to that policy. Well, there was a time when I had 3 children in parochial high school down in South Florida, and it was quite expensive, and I was not able to contribute, but she did, and I reminded her of that. And it goes along with what Mother Teresa says. Sometimes what you can do, I cannot, and what I can do, you cannot. So that, I think she felt a little better about things, and just in reality, looking at her situation, she was not able to do direct care. She was in another state. Her children were younger. It just was not feasible. So, but she did do a good part. She got down when she could, and she contributed to that long-term care policy that enabled us to give Mom the best care we could. So.
And when it comes to guilt, that's another natural feeling that you're going to have in any caregiving situation. But if you can ask yourself each day, did I do everything that I possibly could within the expectations of everything else in my life that day? Then you can assess at the end of each day whether your guilt is real or perceived, or you're putting it on yourself, and just do better the next day if you need to, or realize, yes, I had 5 other things going on. I did the absolute best I could in light of everything else going on. You're going to have feelings of guilt. Your siblings will have feelings of guilt. Other people have feelings of guilt. But if you can focus at the end of each day to say, did I do the best I could in light of other circumstances, and not think you have to do everything 100% perfect, because life happens around you too. It's important to remember that at the end of each day. So how can we counter this stress that's building up in our bodies? What can we do? I mean, everybody knows the usual things. You got to eat well, you got to sleep well, and you got to exercise. But when it comes to practicality, and you need, 30 hours in a 24-hour day, how are you going to do it? Well, you've got to make the time to do something. If you don't do all of them every day, do one thing a day. So sleep is really, really important. They say you got to get 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep. In a caregiving situation, that's not always likely. But what has been shown is if you can get 4 to 8 hour blocks of uninterrupted sleep, so if you can do 4-hour blocks of an uninterrupted sleep pattern, then you have to get up and go check on your loved one, and then come back and you can get 4 more hours of uninterrupted sleep. That is better. It's not the ideal getting 8 hours of sleep, but it is extremely helpful then if you get up every 2 hours, say, and have to turn a loved one. So if you're in a situation where you cannot get 4 hours of sleep at a time, a 4-hour block, then you do need to try to plan something else so you get that 4 hours. Otherwise, detrimental effects to your health. That's what they say. Of course, 8 is ideal. We all know that. If you can't get the 4 hours of sleep, or up to 8 hours, even though you're in bed and you don't have any duties to tend to, then you should see a physician and speak to your physician about that, because getting that sleep is going to help your body heal. It's going to help that inflammation go down. So if you're not getting uninterrupted sleep, then seek help for that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you need that so you can be your best you, so you can be your best you to the person you're caring for.
Right. Including sleep studies are good.
Yes, if your physician recommends.
Right.
Diet, we all know about making good choices. We don't have to tell you about that. But the key here is add supplements. If you're not currently taking a vitamin, you've got 2 good recommendations, Bernadette.
I did, but I say this, but always under the care of your physician. Some of the things that I did was I started taking fish oil, ultra-pure pharmaceutical-grade fish oil, magnesium. Magnesium has a very calming effect on the body. But I would not just say, go ahead and take a bunch of it. You take too much of it and you'll be on the john quite a bit. But it is, in fact, what they use for pregnant women who have seizures. They use magnesium. And so it does have a nice calming effect. Vitamin D is good, and the B vitamins especially. They're probably the things you can take without any interference with most drugs because, you usually just urinate them right out if you have more than you need.
And I'll echo that. I'm not a person who takes supplements or vitamins, maybe vitamins occasionally. I did add magnesium, taking a magnesium caplet when I was caring for my father. Again, be sure it doesn't counteract, to check with your physician, but it's something I added when I was a caregiver. Not taking it after, my father passed away, but it's something I did do for myself then. Exercise. We've got walk, or walk. If you can do anything, just walk. 5 minutes is good. That 15 minutes of exercise you have to do every day, of course, that's ideal. But we're not all in ideal situations. If it's go to the end of your driveway and back 5 times just to get a mental break and clarity and to get your body moving, do it. So if you can walk 5 minutes, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, if you can walk 30 minutes, 1 time a day, just do something to keep your body moving. And when it's not moving in the caregiving situation, there is extreme health benefits to that, and especially to yourself as a caregiver. Meditation, they have on your phones those guided blocks of meditation where you can just sit, and the idea is keep your mind still. Who's tried to sit and keep your mind still? It doesn't work for me very, very often. But when somebody's guiding you through, and you can set it for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and there's this voice that, and you keep your eyes closed, and it walks you through, your mind actually can quiet somewhat. It actually is true. Of course, the other way to do that is through prayer. And prayer is very supportive for both internal and external issues. One of my favorite things to do that ended up happening on EWTN, Mother Angelica has the rosary on at 9:30 at night, and it's visual, and my father would be in his bed, and we would turn that on, and we would say the rosary together. Got to the point where he couldn't say the rosary, but it was on, and that itself, the rosary, the prayer is an absolute beautiful prayer, of course, and that also has become something that I cherish that time doing that, whether he was able to say the rosary with me or not. That's something that we did. There's some great books out there.
Yes, I have some here that you can take a look at later. One of them is called 36-Hour Day. It's a very good, some of you may have already read that. I'm willing to share with you. And another one is Share the Care. It was written by 2 women who were going to take care of a friend of theirs who was sick, and they did so for like 3.5 years. But it's a model you can follow for a loved one. They had different people scheduled different times to take care, so nobody had too much of a burden at any one time. There's another very helpful video put out by Senior Gems. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I'll give you the 800 number later. It's a video on dealing with people with dementia. It's very, very well done. It's a short video, maybe about a half an hour, 40 minutes or so. And it divides each level of dementia into each of the gems, the pearl, the ruby, the diamond, and explains each one. And it's quite helpful. So those are just a couple of them there that you're welcome to look at.
And we list support groups here as a way to counter the stress. Support groups could be its own 5 slides, There's a support group for every single thing you can practically think of. Of course, there's the Alzheimer's one if you were here and attended James's program. They have day programs, respite programs, but for disease specific, there's a Parkinson's support group. There's all kinds of things if you look in our town to attend. If you don't have a sibling or anybody else in town helping you, support groups are ideal. You may think, I don't want to go and sit there and listen to other people's problems. I've got enough of my own. But again, it's that community that Bernadette and I talked about in the very beginning that brought us together as caregivers in the same building where we were with our loved ones. And so support, you can't say enough about. And there's a number of, on the resource slide, you'll see where you can look to find some of them. And knowledge, Bernadette started talking to you about, websites, books, and there's more, the more knowledge you have, that's power. The more power you have, you feel you can do more with.
Right. And the more you can learn about your loved one's condition, and including their medications and side effects, it would be very helpful in their care. Another thing that's I found helpful as well is to become an active partner with your loved one's physician. So, in other words, you're working toward the same goal. And they tend to be your ally, your good friend, you're someone that's really going to help you. And I can tell you that this really helped me out toward the very end of my mother's life. She had been placed on hospice care, and it was coming up toward the weekend, and I could tell by the way she was behaving that there wasn't much time. So and this was like 5 o'clock in the evening, and I realized that we did need some medication drops to dry up secretions and for pain. Now, if I had gone through Saturday, I might have had to speak to another physician who did not know my mother's case very well, and it would have been, run around and round in circles, but he waited till after he finished his office hours, called me back, we discussed it, and he made sure that I had the prescriptions we needed for the weekend. And I can't tell you how comforting that was to have that. And it was because we had built a relationship, we partnered to be, with the same goal of taking care of my mother.
Some more ways to counter stress. I'm going to go through them really quick. Every single one of these I did. Downtime, my downtime was to go on my backyard and I have a little swing and take a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, depending, and if I could get that whole cup. Sometimes I couldn't finish the whole cup, but even if it's 5 minutes of downtime where you're out of your caregiving situation, it does body good. Respite care comes in many forms. You will get to the point where I can't do this right now, I need a longer break, or you have to go away to a family event, you have to go to a wedding in another state. What am I going to do? I'm the only one here. There are avenues. You can do respite care in a facility. You can place a loved one in a facility for a weekend or a week or however long, or you can have an agency supply staff to come into your home and do 24-hour care. So those are options. A hobby distraction, everybody has hobbies, or maybe you don't have a hobby, but a distraction just to get you away enough, for example, a jigsaw puzzle. Throw one on the table that'll sit by itself, and if you have 5 minutes to go just to clear your mind and focus on pieces, it clears your mind. Not that you're really ever going to finish the 1,000-piece puzzle, but again, it's another source of taking you out of your caregiving frame of mind to let your body expose to something else. Journaling or doing a blog, I have about 5 different notebooks. None of them are full, where, I have one from my mom when I was just writing things at night when I was angry or upset or frustrated or wanted to cry, or both or all of the above. And occasionally I'll find, oh, here's where I started this, and I keep them in a stack now. But it's very healing just to be able to, before, during, and after your caregiving situations, even if you're writing down your thoughts for 5 minutes, again, very helpful. A bouncer, you have to have a bouncer, your own personal bouncer, not a big guy to, deflect, but somebody to talk to. It can be the same person or it can be different people who, they have a heads up. I'm just calling you to talk to you about my present situation. Not that I really need you to do anything, but listen. And that goes a long way when you want to share your frustrations. Your spouse may be tired of hearing your frustrations because they experience them firsthand, but somebody who can be your own personal bouncer, just that they're just going to listen to you, not try to solve anything because they really can't, but it allows you, again, to get that out, much like journaling. Treat yourself. If you've had a rough week, go get a pedicure, or do something you like to do, play around the golf, whatever you can think of. Treat yourself every now and then because it's wonderful.
Yes.
You guys have done anything, any of your ideas to help relieve stress that we haven't shared or you want to share with anybody else here? Anybody have any other ideas?
I started knitting.
Knitting.
Because my father was losing his mind, so basically I had to be watching him all the time.
That would be a good hobby. Did you ever finish what you were knitting? Did you ever finish what you were knitting? Exactly.
I didn't, but I just...
That's the hobby distraction.
Yes,
It's a wonderful thing because it's an outlet. Exactly. So you've proven that that's very helpful. Okay, so because we've gotten to the siblings, yours, theirs, or none at all, I guess we're going to have to move a little quickly. So if you have siblings, whether your siblings are willing to participate or totally unwilling and want nothing to do with it, you have to have some type of initial meeting, sit-down meeting, or a conference call if everybody's scattered in all different directions, just to assess everybody's abilities and inabilities. What can you do? What are you not willing to do? I'm one of 5 siblings, and my youngest 2, they've got little kids. They weren't able to come up and physically meet the demands and be there all the time when, say, my father was, when he was living with us. But I had an older brother who said, I can come once a month. And my other sister who said, I can come every month for 2 weeks at a time on this month around my travel schedule. She was a little flexible with her work. So if you get everybody's abilities and inabilities up front, get them down on paper, then you can jump to the bottom and devise a family care plan, how to best care for your loved one in that situation, your parent, sharing the care. It's important to inform everyone, everybody get a copy of the plan, but review it monthly because your needs are going to change personally and those of your loved one are going to change. If you're in a situation, since I own a home health agency, I see many, many different families in many, many different situations, and you have families who don't even speak to each other. In that case, a facilitator is helpful. A social worker, a counselor, a pastor, an elder law attorney, an impartial relative or friend, or a professional care manager. Those are all options to use to help facilitate, this initial meeting and perhaps ongoing ones to get this family care plan together. You will find there are siblings who want nothing to do with it, or you have everybody wants to do everything and you're in each other's way, which is just as stressful too.
Right.
Do you have anything to add?
Well, I found when I was starting to think about this whole thing that in my situation, I was extremely blessed. I have, a brother that's a physician, a brother that's an attorney, and I used to bounce things off of them, and I had support from them as well. So it was very helpful. I didn't really run into any situation where we needed to have an intervention to have somebody cooperate. It was more or less everybody did what they could, and I think that I recognized that what they could was all they needed to do. I think that kept the peace.
And that relates back to the Mother Teresa quote we showed in the beginning. Everybody will do what they can when they can, and you can't do what they can at some times. It's important to think of siblings, not just your immediate siblings if you have them, but your loved one. In my father's case, it was his sister. He has siblings too, right? You have to consider them and what they are willing to do, not willing to do. My father's sister lived in North Carolina. It was all she could do was just to come sit beside him for not a very long period of time because it was very stressful for her just to see her brother like that. So you need to include their siblings as well and keep them informed to help keep their stress levels down. When you're coming up with your family care plan, who's going to do what, this is just a couple questions to think about. I'm not going to go through them because we're out of time, but important is to prepare for the end. At some point, there will be an end when you're caring for a parent. You may not know when that end is, or you may have a pretty good idea if you're in hospice care and they keep you apprised. But plan for the end at the beginning. What's going to happen? Make sure there's funeral plans arranged, because we've also been in a situation where there were no plans and a sudden death is also very, very stressful. So that can help eliminate stress if you're somewhat prepared. Never prepared, but. Finances, everybody thinks, oh, Medicare is going to pay for this. They're going to help pay for my parents. Medicare does not pay for much at all. Quick question, they'll pay for the injections, wound care, to teach you a few things, and that's about it. They do not pay for 24-hour care. They don't pay for meals to be delivered. They don't pay for extra help around the house because your parents becoming debilitated. Medicare does not pay for that. Just a general idea of cost if you haven't experienced any cost issues yet. These are based on John Hancock statistics from 2013, increasing at this per year. So if you're in a nursing home with a private room, that's about $95,000 a year. Semi-private room, $82,000, or an assisted living facility, $41,000. We've got experiences with different numbers than that, but again, these are 2013. Over here is home care, out-of-pocket costs if you have a home health aide coming and helping with some of those bathing, dressing, and housemaking activities. On the other hand, you do save about $300 per patient per month if you use home care. That's John Hancock statistics, because you're eliminating some of the unnecessary trips to the emergency room or items like that. But that's a very brief cost assessment. Who pays for it if you can't afford to pay for it, or your mother or father can't afford to pay for it? Well, we talked about Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid, if you don't have finances, but you make too much money for Medicaid, a lot of lawyers will help you plan for what's called the Medicaid spend down, where you spend down your assets until you hit the Medicaid level where Medicaid will pick up and pay for, say, a nursing home bed. But you have to plan for that in advance, because you don't want to spend down and then have a gap of a month or two before you can get on Medicaid, and then there's nothing to pay for anything, an important thing to remember. Supplemental insurance only pays for what Medicare or Medicaid doesn't pay if it's covered by Medicare and Medicaid. So typically there's not a lot of help from supplemental policies. Long-term care policies, however, there are some very good ones out there. The VA has benefits not only for the VA member themselves, but they have spousal benefits as well for a lot of homemaking, home health aid activities. Hospice, who attended the hospice presentation? Or is that next week? Anyway, hospice is, if you are in hospice, actually, hospice covers most everything, especially in the final several months. They cover everything: prescriptions, medications, the care that comes to the home, hospice, and then lots of community resources are available if you start looking for them. These are some of the places where you can, like the Area Agency on Aging, you can call and then they'll open up a whole bunch of resources to you and where to look. Some of these things you have to pay for, of course, like Meals on Wheels, but it's an option and you can put that in your family care plan. Moms who need 3 meals a week delivered because I can't be there but 1 day a week. Caregiver conferences are a good place to learn a lot of information, and they have grants at some of the caregiver conferences. Health fairs, care managers, elder law attorneys, some of the things we talked about. Telehealth monitoring, when your parent is in, just need a little bit of extra help, there are some telehealth systems that have a pill dispenser box that opens up pill dispensers at the right times that you program it to. So some pretty neat stuff out there. And then there is a newsletter called Caregivers Weekly Newswire if you want to be on the email list. It takes everything from a week that's been in the news, in articles, on TV, about different healthcare resources. Caregiving is one of them, that's why I pulled that up. Talks about Medicare, talks about retirement, talks about different issues, and it provides a link in this newsletter to all the different things that appeared in the news that week, so you don't have to go scour yourself, and you can just click on the ones that you're interested in learning about. If you're interested in this newsletter, I'll take your email address and I'll put you on the list. I'm done.
Okay. And anyone who's interested in any of these books, if you'd like to borrow them, you're welcome to. And and the website for the senior gems, it's an 800 number.
Are there any specific questions that anybody has? I know we went through the last part very fast, but and the important thing is to know stress is real. You got to try to counter it, and you need somebody. I think my best words of advice to be that bouncer, whether it's a sister, a friend, somebody else. Those are the two biggest things I think that, if I had to say two things that helped me. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.